This episode is brought to you by the letter L. Zeb Wells' Spider-Man run is not particularly liked at all. Some absolutely dislike it for the idiotic handling of Peter, others dislike it for the shipping factor, others point to the shoddy artwork. Lucky for you, we're going to dig into the storyline that combines all three. Welcome to The Amazing Spider-Man Dead Language by Zeb Wells. For some backstory, Marvel teased us with the idea of what did Peter do? All we really knew is that there was a big explosion involved, a lot of purple smoke, a lot of damage, and Peter's relationships are now in the gutter. We also knew that Mary Jane got together with some guy named Paul and adopted kids with him. We were left hanging with, what the hell just happened? The Amazing Spider-Man Dead Language seeks to answer that question right here. We open with some normal antics. Peter is getting ready for work. MJ and Paul are dealing with their demon children. I don't mean that as a pejorative, even though 90% of the fandom does, because the plot will reveal that that's less of an insult and more of a description later on. Moving on. The weather acts up, which could only mean one thing. The Scribble Man has returned. Okay, I know this is being said by a child, but honestly, couldn't this child have come up with something better? I mean, this is a fictional work after all. The Scribble Man as a villain moniker is an awful name. I'd say Blue's Clues would use that for a Halloween episode, but that's an insult to Blue's Clues. They at least realize their audience consists of children and adults trying to learn English. I mean, couldn't they have done like Latin or Greek by saying, I don't know, syllogism or symbolon? Is that too much to ask? Hell, Scrawl alone would sound much better than Scribble Man. We cut to 1 year earlier. We meet Rabin. Rabin is a man obsessed with esoteric math from the Mayans. Why? Because he believes it will help him unlock the secrets of the universe and become an emissary of a Mayan god of death. Way up. Yeah, that's not what way up are, but whatever. When has comic book mythology ever matched up with actual mythology? Rabin isn't particularly happy with Peter stealing his opportunity to be a Dark Messiah, so in order to gain back the title of Dark Messiah, Rabin marks Peter and MJ for a sacrifice to his god to see if he's worthy. He drags the two to an alternate Earth because reasons, ending issue 21. Issue 22 opens with a brief flashback to the present. Since Osborn is supposed to be a good guy in this portion of the run, he storms off to get the Gold Goblin suit, running into Kamala Khan. Kamala Khan is wasted in this entire run, not just these 6 issues. We cut back to 1 year earlier. Peter and MJ are running from various monsters meant to resemble Mayan paintings and carvings. I do like the idea of turning artwork into actual monsters, but the way they're drawn needs some work. It kinda gives me the impression that these are giant children's toys. Spider-Boy honestly should be the one fighting these things. It's not the colors either. Maybe it's the shape of the eyes. In a different comic they might be fun to witness, but this one, no. Peter gets punched out, and MJ runs into Paul, and they are both saved by Paul. I honestly don't have a problem with Paul just going in here and saving them because Last Survivor in the Apocalyptic Hellscape is a trope that works. Paul takes Peter and MJ to his hideout where he explains that symbols and language are everything and they can be manipulated, and manipulating these symbols will help them understand the secrets of the universe and power and magic and blah. I don't care. Meanwhile, Way Up is not particularly happy with Rabin over his prior failures. Like, really unhappy. As a design, Way Up sucks. Wikipedia honestly has much better designs for the gods of death, yes plural, page than whatever this book synthesized. It's just so generic. After we go, yay, Spider-Verse reference. The comic tries to give us a scene with Paul and MJ. It's planting seeds that MJ is defrosting Paul's colder exterior. Then Way Up finds them and is pretty pissed. Being a god, he is pretty powerful and he floors Peter almost instantly, nearly crushing his skull. Peter soon gets bailed out by Paul. Peter is told to leave using the spider device. Paul says if Peter dies, then there will be nothing holding back the emissary from just flooding their world with death. MJ plants the spider device on Peter while he's being grabbed by Way Up. This basically portal rips Way Up in two. There's a problem with this. You see, gods like Way Up don't die gently, and Paul has a bright idea. Knowing that Peter is headed towards New York City, he decides to push the exploding death god into a portal. So, way back in issue 1, the answer to what did Peter do? He didn't actually do anything that was his fault when it caused the explosion. Paul's the one who caused the explosion by pushing the Death God into the portal. The end of issue 22 shows us that Peter was tricked by MJ into returning to Earth instead of her, and Way Up followed him, though it wasn't Way Up following him, it was Paul pushing him into the portal. Not sure why Paul and MJ couldn't have just leaped through the portal and let the exploding Death God, explode on the uninhabited world. In a stupid move, Peter buries the Spider-Man suit near the site of the explosion, steals clothes and heads towards the Baxter building because he for a fact knows that time is now moving faster on their end than it is on his world. So, with the Fantastic Four, he finds Reed and Sue aren't there, so Peter wants access to the lab. However, there's a small problem. Yeah, remember that Peter buried his spider suit? Well, the feds brought dogs, and the feds found it, and now Captain America is making a few phone calls about Peter. And Johnny and Ben want to run tests to see Peter is Peter and not someone like Mystique or a Skrull. Peter books it, and then when Captain America runs into him, Peter chooses violence. Issue 23 ends with Peter consulting with Norman Osborn. Issue 24 opens with Peter stealing from the Fantastic Four. Johnny's stupidity allows Spider-Man to simply escape. Man, why is Johnny Storm always written like an impulsive 16-year-old even though he's supposed to be, not 16, closer to 30 here? The disadvantages of being a hothead means that you're a hothead your whole life. Anyways, Norman helps Peter get back into confronting Way Up. Kamala spots the two of them. Peter arrives just in time using the portal technology, only to lose. Paul kills Rabin. Issue 24 ends with the reveal that Paul and MJ had kids in the time that they were separated. Issue 25 is a recap from MJ's perspective. Rabin is pretty pissed that his god of death is dead, and somehow the Cancerverse isn't happening on a local level. I know that the death gods are not literal death, but still. Rabin attempts to become a new death god. At first, Mary Jane won't budge from the area since her love is coming back for her. A month later, she is fighting on this hostile world. 3 months later, they adopt kids. And a year later, Paul and MJ and the kids are truly a family. She also gets this stupid randomizer power, which I really think is trash. I'll get into this later. So MJ fell for Paul and adopted the kids with him. MJ loves Paul now and won't leave him. Outside, Peter gets into a spat with the Fantastic Four. The fight is broken up by Captain America. Peter is heartbroken because of course you would be, why wouldn't you? We see flashes of what else happened, including this continuity issue. More on this later. The issue ends with Rabin rising from his resting place. We open the infamous issue 26 with Kamala Khan applying for her internship at Oscorp. We then see the present. Rabin is attempting to be the god of death now, apparently becoming stronger by dying. Peter is frankly 110% done with this guy's nonsense, and Gold Goblin and Ms. Marvel also join the fight, but Rabin isn't stupid. He uses the glyphs to summon monsters. Well, a singular monster. As Rabin goes on, he reveals to the audience that Paul isn't who he says he is. In a flashback, Paul is revealed to be Rabin's son. We get our continuity error. I normally don't mind continuity errors, but given that the choice of clothes are the same, and the poses are the same, I choose to believe that the writers and artists flip-flopped over who actually punched who. I mean, literally, this is the same story arc. You really shouldn't have an excuse with this. I mean, editors exist for this reason. MJ is also able to accuse Paul's complicit in global destruction. Why? Because she compares the idea to Paul being like Peter. Spider-Man let his uncle die by his willing omissions. Paul let his entire world die by his willing omissions. So apparently economics of scale don't affect MJ at all. And the greater power that, comes with altering reality does not come with greater responsibility in MJ's mind because she's frickin' stupid in this run. Rabin also reveals that the children are actually chains to bind Mary Jane and Paul. and that these demon children, yeah, that's basically her description now, end up fading away. Also, why is Paul drawn like the angry video game nerd? Now that I've said it, you will not be able to unsee it. Enraged by the death of her children, she attacks Rabin. MJ really wants to kill Rabin herself. MJ does poorly and has to be bailed out by Kamala Khan. MJ is told off by Peter. Rabin gets to you, the world dies in a flood of death by an evil death god. Peter proceeds to beat the ever-living crap out of Rabin in order to prevent him from getting to MJ. Rabin says he sees the future, it's inevitable he'll kill that redhead. Rabin, being a teleporter, teleports directly into Kamala's fist. Kamala advises MJ to keep running. Rabin finds MJ, and as he foresaw, he runs her through. Rabin boasts about how he's a god now and the world will be flooded in blood. Then he disintegrates. To hammer the point home, here's his dead for realsy skeleton. MJ wasn't sacrificed. It was a trick by Kamala Khan. Thus ends Dead Language. This comic is absolutely awful. Let's look at it from a structural perspective. You basically have two storylines with the same antagonist running simultaneously through 6 issues. This is not inherently a bad thing. The problem is that since these two storylines feed into each other, one of them sucking will tank the quality of the other one. And tank it into the never it did. Let's start with the flashbacks or the what did Peter do part. As a superhero, this run does a good job at making Peter look absolutely inept. He basically loses out to one of Rabin's creatures and needed to be bailed out by Paul. First time, tragedy. Second time, farce. Third time, absolutely pathetic. I do question Paul's motivation to save MJ and himself in this particular instance, as I said before. The portal is right there. He and MJ could have just simply run through it. Paul was the one who pushed way up into the portal and caused a massive explosion. Wouldn't exactly call this crater small, and the fact that rescue forces are on their way says a lot. Less charitable readers might try to interpret this as him trying to murder the hypotenuse of a love triangle. While we're talking about shipping, let's get on to MJ and Paul's relationship. If you want to build a relationship that replaces the popular Peter-MJ ship, especially since these two were at one point married, then by all means, make the new character you set up be interesting. This is one of the main problems with Paul. MJ went from dating the main character of a book to dating a background character. I have seen some fans claim that Paul is a writer's self-insert. I vehemently disagree, as self-indulgent self-insert would actually have some level of characterization because, self-insert. They are idealized versions of an author, after all. Paul is whatever the hell the narrative wants him to be. Rich to pay Peter's medical expenses despite having absolutely no documentation since he literally just arrived from a dead world? Sure. A good father? Sure. Actually guilty about actions he took? Nah, sure. We're told that he's a good person at heart and is guilty, but we never actually see him feel guilty. It's just an informed attribute at this point. In every other appearance, he is more concerned over the disappearance of his children than he is for being responsible for genocide. The creators put so little thought into Paul that they couldn't consistently pick between who threw the first punch between issue 25 and 26. But enough about Paul, let's complain about MJ. Apparently, great power comes great responsibility is transferable. A little global genocide is just, a big oopsie as letting one of your relatives die because you didn't take an action. Oh boy. Does anyone ever tell her that she should have great power comes great responsibility? That means that it should scale proportionally. The more power you have, the more responsibility you have. This is why we do not just simply let people build buildings willy-nilly, because there's a lot more at stake, such as the environmental damage or the personnel damage of people actually in the building. Ugh. I don't understand how she's able to make this comparison between Paul and Peter. I said last time that MJ and Paul's relationship is heavily underdeveloped because Paul has the personality of a block of wood. Her children, meanwhile, are just there. They don't even have consistent names. Okay, the girl doesn't have a consistent name. She goes by Rami or Stephanie, and honestly, they didn't plan this out. They were just props to keep MJ with Paul. Then there's the jackpot. The jackpot is basically MJ's Ben 10 Hero Watch, except we really don't know its upper limits. All we know is she gets a random grab bag of powers out of it. So, no limits. This is going to heavily limit your storytelling, and it will polarize it to the extreme. Either everything will be extremely easy, or everything will be extremely difficult. It's going to be abused by both terrible and good writers. I don't know what the hell they were thinking other than, hey look, we need to give MJ some superpowers in order to justify her existence. Sick of me complaining about MJ? Well, let's complain about Kamala Khan. Her role in this Spider-Man run is a footnote at best. She's just Norman Osborn's intern. That's it. Now, her being an intern to Norman Osborn? Okay. Except she ends up dying in the story arc. What exactly was her role in the storyline where she dies? She makes some, well, that happened humor everyone stereotypes the MCU as having. I thought the mandate from on high was to get her to have an excuse to be a mutant, not kill her off. This also isn't the first time she does this whole, because I was here too. Sorry, that was a terrible entrance. She says, holy crap, somebody should probably deal with that. Okay, you're killing her off. Make it dramatic. Don't make her be this most generic teenage superhero ever. Even when she's dying, she's referencing how, LOL, I shouldn't be able to shapeshift. Yeah, look, you still made the conscious choice to shapeshift. I don't mind continuity issues between books unless they're crossover events, which is a whole different discussion. But referencing your continuity mistakes doesn't exactly make the whole contrivance go away. If anything, this instance of her doing it actually makes the contrivance worse. It's not dramatic that she's dying now, it's now comedic. Rabin as a character. Boring. Moving on. Peter. He mishandled the entirety of the Fantastic Four and Captain America situations. But given his emotional state and that an explosion literally happened right next to his face, from a death god, mind you, I say his actions are pretty understandable. Now, that doesn't justify what he did to the Fantastic Four or Captain America, but the idea that Peter is somehow being unreasonable for being upset that he burned a heck of a lot of bridges, only for him to be met with, yeah, the woman he loves just simply moved past him and had a family with a guy who destroyed his own world and is just really sad about it, but never really shows any contrition for it. Honestly, why is Peter treated like the one that's being unreasonable? He's perfectly reasonable. One, time on Earth 616 and whatever Paul's world was. Yeah, that doesn't exactly have a one-to-one timescale. Peter was moving as fast as he could, only to be met with this nonsense. There's also the other issue. Does Peter actually win any fight in this story arc? No, he doesn't. It's literally everybody else who does actual work. That, my friends, is the issue with this damn run. Meaningful conflict is the soul of drama. This run cannot establish any meaningful conflict, so it tries to artificially establish them by beating up Peter over and over again. That's not drama, that's trauma. The mere fact that Peter is being punched in the face is not building drama. You need to care about why he's being punched in the face. And when you care about why he's being punched in the face, you have to establish if there's some kind of progression of him being punched in the face to punching the other guy in the face. If not, why should we care? It's just a montage of Peter being punched in the face. Nobody wants to watch meaningless suffering all day because meaningless suffering is not exactly a scarce resource in real life. The artwork is awful. Everyone looks like a bunch of clay Neanderthal dolls who are trying to emote like the humans. Special mention goes to Kamala Khan's death scene. The inept artwork pulls you out of the moment. I mean, they're supposed to be reacting to this teenage superhero dying. Yet, this is all they can muster. They look bored and stoned. The villains are trash, and one note. Paul is a plot device, and also one note. MJ, by extension, comes off as a moron for liking Paul. I'm honestly surprised she even had a reaction to the kids dying, considering how unempathetically she treated Peter over the entire run. Peter exists solely to get the crap kicked out of him so other characters could solve the problem. A character who is ultimately a footnote in the current comics run ends up dying just to give Peter some man pain. And by the power vested in me by the fact that this is my video, I hereby sentence everyone in this book to mandatory lessons from the Greco-Roman Muses, the story trickster god Anansi, and Tolkien. Goodbye.